I want to steer the conversation to capitalism because we are so proud to be a capitalistic country, and we don't realize how toxic it is. A society wrecking monster at this point that has really destroyed the fiber of what this country could be, not what it was, because it had. I don't know America to be ethical. I don't know if you do, but when I go back to the First Nations people and all down, but I just think, like, when we talk about capitalism, it is defined as an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled for profit by private or corporate owners rather than by the state or by the people whose time and labor powers those companies. I want to open it up to you guys again, and I want you to define what capitalism means to you and how we define it for the people so that they can understand what it really is, because just like socialism, it's been hijacked and we don't really understand what it is doing to our country and to the average working man and woman. So go ahead, Francesca. So, you know what, Tib, you started talking, so go ahead. And then I know Francesca's not going to forget what she has to say.
I'm just going to say, I want to go first and get it out the way because I probably had the least to say on it. Screw everybody. Get as much stuff as you can and die with a whole bunch of toys. That's capitalism to me.
Die with toys. I love that. I mean, yeah, it's like we operate like we can take it with us. Like somehow in the afterlife, if you have a PS4, it's still going to be there when you get wherever you're going. Like, no, it's not. I mean, I know there's like an official definition, but I think it is a process of wealth generation, right? It's not about food. It's not about a roof over your head. It's not about family. It's not about anything else. It's a wealth generative system that generally makes wealth for a boss, right? And someone who is your employer. And it is highly privatized. So that wealth, you have no say in what happens to that wealth. If I'm working at a factory like Amazon, I have no say in how that factory is run. So it's generating wealth for someone else and then relying on a wage in order to survive.
Yeah. I think the definition that Ida just gave for capitalism versus what we're told is capitalism are two completely different things. The power has kind of risen to the top and is being controlled by small groups or families or entities, conglomerates, and it hasn't had the trickle down effect that we've been sold a bill of sales about. And I think in order for us to understand why capitalism doesn't work is because when you look at America, and the motto of America has been the American dream. If you dream it, it can happen. There's no holds bars. But we know that that's not true because we all don't start at the same starting line, and some people have, a cheat code and all that other stuff. And then also, even when you think about just like the expansion of America, it was called Manifest Destiny. And what you really think about Manifest Destiny is being like, it is my right to take whatever the fuck I want to take at someone else's loss. And so when you have that mentality of entitlement, it's hard to have a true capitalistic society because someone is always going to be stabbing someone in the back. And that has been applauded as like, oh, you're a shrewd business person because you know how to lie, steal, and cheat. And it's like, that's not what capitalism was intended to be.
I think that's sorry to jump in, Chloe. I just feel like that's a really good point because I think I always go to Chomsky on this whenever he talks about free trade and all this. He always says, free trade isn't free. Like none of these corporations and all the ones we're supposed to worship and we're supposed to, wow, you're so entrepreneurial. Like a lot of them have gotten where they've gotten, like you're saying, through cheating, through lobbying, through tax breaks, through subsidies. And so the amount that these markets that we rely on are actually overinflated by the government, by our tax dollars. So what, they can turn around and not give us PPE when we're working, in a factory, whatever. So the idea that it's truly free and that we have a perfectly capitalist system now is not real. It's a lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
CG Film said, we haven't had capitalism for a minute. What we have now is socialism for elites. Right. And what I want to make sure that I do talk about and touch on is that fact that those of us who come from immigrant families, what capitalism and the idea of capitalism means to us. Now, when you're talking to people who get on rafts, who walk from, people walk here from Guatemala I don't know. I never met somebody who walked from a country to another country. Never, unless they were in Israel and they're on the border. But I've never met someone who walked from Guatemala to Mexico to the United States of America. So that means that the conditions of where you are. So, and listen, these conversations unravel other things, because when you talk about immigration and you start talking about these things, people start saying, well, stay in your country. Let's not forget that the capitalism in America has destabilized the governments in so many other countries. And that's why people strap babies to their backs and walk through different countries to get here. So now when we're talking about capitalism, you're talking about people like my grandmother who came here looking for a dream because she was told that and she came from Puerto Rico, which is allegedly America, right? She came from Puerto Rico and was told that if she came here, her life would be better. She would have more opportunities. And you multiply that by all of the people that come here from all over the world, because what we're not going to do on Truth Serum is give immigration a brown name and forget that people migrate here from all over the world, including Asia and Eastern Europe, where they come here and commit crimes just like everybody else, because
and have true anchor babies, like they legit have a baby and then fly back.
Absolutely. So we're not going to do that here, because this is the problem with media and why the information is being improperly fed to the people. But when you talk about capitalism and the dream that is fed to people who come here, who risk their lives and their well-being to come here, it's because they believe in this dream that is not real. And it has been sprinkled about the world in a way where we walk around saying that this is the best country on earth, yet and still, like Tim said earlier, veterans that come back from fighting for our liberties can't even go get a test for COVID-19 right now, right? Because they can't even have breakfast, lunch, or dinner, let alone a decent physical exam. So when we talk about capitalism and what it has become, and not by its purest form, what we have done to pollute it so that it can benefit the rich and the greedy, and people who want to create generational wealth so that they can keep people like us down, that's what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah, and I think when we us common folks talk about capitalism, we're understanding it from like a supply and demand standpoint. It's like if I have a good and I sell it, I make profit off that good, and that is a simplistic version of capitalism. I think that's what we need to get back to. But when you think about it in the grand scheme of like corporate capitalism, it's so many stops along the way, and each person is taking a little piece off of that money. By the time it gets to the person it's intended for, there's nothing left. And so that's the major problem. If you even look at the situation with COVID and we're trying to get state supplies, the government, handed that process out to third parties, and now states have to bid for supplies that were intended for their use anyway. And so that is just people are constantly skimming off the top, and they need to be exposed. And I actually thought about this last night when I was watching headlines and news clips. And it's like, you know what? All of this had to happen, because if he wasn't elected, we, the people, would not know who the crooks are, because they're testifying, they're on camera, they're giving interviews, they're giving statements, their pictures are everywhere, they're being exposed. So now we know who to go after, because we would not have known if he had not been in office.
That's on point. That was the argument a lot of people made, and they were vilified for it. The fact that we go to sleep when we got a Democrat in office because the media, by and large, won't report anything, and it'll just be Fox. Mm-hmm. And Fox, we just say, Fox hates the blacks. So we could just ignore everything Fox has to say. Right. But capitalism in the idea form, like, I agree with you, Ida. It sounds good. Come here, work your ass off, build something. Anybody can do it. But in reality, when you get here and you realize that, I don't know the immigrant situation, but I know the black situation, it is a lot harder than you think. The institutional barriers that we face from just imagine coming to the country, can't speak the language. Then you got racism on top of it. And don't be a dark-skinned immigrant. Oh my God, they just lump you in with black and treat you like black folks. And now you're disenfranchised doubly with language and with the color barrier. So capitalism, the promise of capitalism is definitely falling short. And now we're left with is what we say like an operation, or what it looks like to me is just an exchange of goods, and that includes human trafficking as well. So it's a disgusting thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but this is the thing that pisses me off, though, because you have the people who are benefiting greatly from capitalism telling immigrants, right, and telling black people they're taking it away from you. right? Those immigrants are coming here and taking the scraps that we're giving you away from you, and then telling the Latinos like they're lazy and they're violent, and they're telling the other immigrants that come here they don't want to do anything. They're violent, they're criminals. And so now we're having this internal war with each other, because the truth is that some people come here from other countries and they do practice anti-Blackness because they've been giving so much bad information about Black people in America. We're not going to lie and tell those lies here either. So then you have all of these people fighting for this dream, and all that we're fighting for is scraps, because they are taking everything.
Yeah.
And they're eating at the table and they're throwing the scraps, and then they're telling us, look who's trying to take your scraps.
Right. Exactly. And again, pitting people against one another, which is perfectly what plutocrats, oligarchs do. I mean, you guys are all hinting on it, but I think we should just name it. Capitalism has been based on colonialism, empire, and slavery. Like, that's its roots. That's why reparations matter, right? As Aida was saying, like the amount of wealth that enslaved Black Americans created for, plantation owners and the North and everybody, right? So like, I think, and in terms of Latin America, what's so interesting is that there's been so many waves of capitalist exploitation. First, it's an actual colonialism, conquering, looting all the silver out of Bolivia, one of the poorest countries in South America. But then there was a resurgence in the 90s where it was like capitalists came back and they were like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to privatize everything. We're going to privatize your road signs. We're going to privatize your roads. We're going to privatize your water. This is going to be great. And then it all fell on its ass. Like, it completely collapsed. The inequality was through the roof, and all the capitalists, they got on their helicopters and literally flew away. And so since the 90s, actually, and that's what we call like the pink wave in Latin America, and it has been rolled back with some very hard right wingers like Bolsonaro in Brazil and such. But like, I actually think, and I think Cuba's the exception, but I think in a lot of places in Latin America, there is a very strong understanding of what capitalists will do to your country, why it's important to have a nationalism that isn't ugly and xenophobic, but is about like national industry and pride, and making something that stays in this country or that's for your fellow countrymen. And I love to think that a lot of those Latinos bring that knowledge and that history of struggle into the States if and when they migrate. Right? They don't forget what's happened to their country, and then they bring that struggle here.
Yeah, I think a large part of that, because I try to figure it out. I try to ask myself, like, why are we in this situation here in America? And it's because we are a mutt country. We are a country mixed of foreigners, of criminals. Like, when you think about like who first arrived here, it was like they were not the cream of the crop people who got here. I'm not talking about enslaved people.
Religious zealots.
Religious zealots. Like, just think about it, like the Puritans, the Pilgrims were like nut jobs who nobody wanted to fuck with, and they was like, get out of here. And they was like, let's go on a boat and like be weird somewhere else. Like, they were the weirdos that nobody wanted around. And so when you have all of this like energy that is woven into the fabric of this country, it's always going to be off until we can all truly find a real idea of what nationalism is for this new America. And I think when you look at Black and brown countries, when you think about Africa, when you think about South America, what they have, which we don't have, is that they have a sense of tribalism and community. They have a long oral history, a long written history of who they were before. And we don't know who we were before because we started as a result of all of these different people coming here with slavery and imperialism. And so we don't really know who we are. It's like we're a mixed baby in 1972 before you call somebody a mixed baby. I don't know what that is. We're lost.
So in 1909, George W. Woodbey said, Negroes are yet under the impression that the accumulation of wealth is in the hands of a few Negroes, and that will solve the problem. Notwithstanding the fact that a few white men have all the wealth and the rest of their brothers are getting poorer every day. So, here in the United States, poverty rates hold steady over past decades, despite an increase in productivity and massive wealth growth. Even before 2020 and COVID-19, which we are at the beginning of, the growth in income in recent decades has tilted to upper income households while the middle class continues to shrink. So the gaps in income between upper income and middle and lower income households are rising, and the share held by middle income households is falling. So when we talk about, when we look at these people protesting and fighting, and like, I understand the angst of the people who want to get back to work, because that is just they are just operating from survival, because we've been indoctrinated to operate from survival. While they thrive, they got us thinking we got to figure it out how we're going to make it another day. We're going to work 40 to 60 hours for these people who are chilling on yachts, and we got to still figure out how we're going to make it to the doctor, if our kids are going to be able to get to school, blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to just make sure that we talked about this, because one of the talking points from this administration and every administration before it, because mind you, this is not a push for the Democrats or a push for the Republicans or for or against, because I think that we all need a wash when it comes to these political parties. They have been corrupted to the core. And when I talk about this, I'm basically always coming from the perspective of the people. Because when we talk about this, we get so, everything's been politicized to the point where we can't even have a real conversation anymore. Because when we start talking about shit, people are like, what, the Democrats and the Republicans? And don't tell me who freed the slaves anymore, because that was not a moment of humanity. It was not a moment of, a decency. It was an economic decision, right? It was all political and economics. It was never about the human beings. But just think about, when you think about, if you had a company and for 400 years, that company was able to operate without paying its employees for 400 years. Wow. And when the corporation that I'm talking about is America, because America's just become a real big corporation. How could you not be ahead of the game? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that? Like,
yeah. You are ahead of the game, and you'll stay ahead of the game. And then you'll tell people the reason why they're not successful is their own fault. They're doing something wrong. They're not working hard enough for. Mm-hmm. If you just had more, if you just tried harder, and if you just pulled your pants up, if you just stop listening to the Little Wayne or whatever, who's
right.
Funny Bunny, what's his name, Bunny? If you stop listening to Bunny, you'll be okay. So that's sort of the propaganda portion I was talking about earlier. Man, I tell you, if white folks and black folks, Latino folks, Asian folks, Native American folks ever woke up and realized there's the 1% that's screwing them, that right there will be the reckoning. That will be the end of all of this. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe.
I do think that COVID-19 is going to be an equalizer. It is going to be the thing that opens up a lot of people's eyes, because now it went from the coast and it's going into the red states. And now you're going to have all these people who thought they had job security, who thought they had good health insurance, who thought that, their infrastructure was good. And it was, keeping out the Mexicans. So that's why they can live lavishly in their, 1.5 acre house. Once they start getting sick and really seeing how this country is not prepared to take care of its people, hopefully they will wake up, but they'll still find another scapegoat, which is the whole point of white privilege and entitlement and racism. It'll say, oh, well, we didn't have enough ICU beds here in my little tiny town because, Black people are on welfare in Chicago. Like, they'll figure out a way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we have a huge, huge fight ahead of us, right? Because I do see two roads emerging very clearly, right? It's either and I think we're seeing that now, which is really sad, like a weaponization and a further brutalization of this path of like, lift yourself up by the bootstraps. Oh, I'm sorry, $1,200 not good enough for you? Deal with it. Oh, I'm sorry, you need to go back to work because, you don't have paid sick leave? Deal with it. That in the extreme. And oh, by the way, there's more debt now. And that's your fault, working people. That's not the fault of the millionaires who are getting tax breaks straight up off of this stimulus budget. So y'all have to deal with that. So that's one path. And I think the other path is what I hope, because I'm an eternal optimist, which is workers and people of color and white folks like joining together and actually having more of a class consciousness and seeing that these demands we're making are not, if they're socialist, so be it. Maybe we need a little bit of that, but they're about basic human rights and basic dignity. And that fight is so, so huge. We can't afford to sit it out no matter how you feel about this election. man, I want to get into a better position because I feel like we're on our heels right now.
We also need to rebrand it because people's ears perk up when they hear socialism or fascism. We need to rebrand it. Just like how people didn't want Obamacare because it had Obama in it, and then you told them it was affordable haircut, and they were like, "Oh, that's what you were talking about? I want it." Like, we need to change the language because people have been programmed to be anti, when they hear these words. So we just got to call it something simple like everyone eats. Or like how can you argue about everyone eating?
A chicken in every pot, right?
That's right. Everybody wants chicken.
Somehow Republicans will find a way.
But you know what? The problem that I'm seeing is that we're letting the media drive the conversation once again. So like, I know I've seen it, I'm sure you have too, where they have this one white woman who's mad because she can't get her hair done, and that becomes the focus of the protest. But in reality, guys, I'm telling you, that's a very small percentage of the people. Of course, we got some idiots that are, I want to go to the movies. I want to go to the bar and someone to call for me. Like, there are people who, are dumb. But most people, man, a lot of people are not getting unemployment checks. A lot of small businesses are going under right now. And even if they reopen some of them, at only 25% capacity. They're not even going to be able to make it, even if you're reopening them with that small amount of patronage. So the media is making it seem like, and I think a lot of black folks and Latino, a lot of us are looking at the white folks going, these people are idiots, but it's all of a side, sort of like they're showing black kids who are getting checks going out and buy Jordans. So they're doing it on the other side. We're just not seeing it because we're not watching it. So we're all getting played simultaneously. Meanwhile, who's sitting good.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, like, I'm a former journalist, and so I can tell you what happens in the newsroom, which is a journalist finds a story that they feel is newsworthy. They'll present it to their editor, and the editor may say, yes, do it, or don't do it. And even above that editor is a publisher or the big wigs, and they'll say, we can't run that story because we just signed a contract with that company who's going to give us advertising dollars, so we got to kill that story. Right. And so that does happen.
I knew it. It
does happen a lot, but so that's one aspect of it, which is you don't want to compromise your income because newspapers are dying and media is dying. Media is dying. We aren't digesting it the same way. So that is one issue, which is a conflict of interest. That happens a lot. But the other aspect, which we're dealing with when it comes to this particular presidential administration, is that for as long as we've been around, we've always given the president the benefit of the doubt that he's a smart person. And so there's a lot of things that you let slide because it's like, I don't want to say that the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And for the most part, most presidents were more intelligent than they were dumb. So you didn't have to do a lot of, we don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But now everybody in this administration is dumber than a box of rocks. And if we were to constantly call them out, then people will look at you like, well, why did you fall for this? If you're the media, why did you let him go so long without checking him? And then you have to explain yourself like, oh, we let a lot of stuff slide because that's just
because it was good TV.
Yeah.
Because it's good TV. And we can be the sacrificial lambs. Immigrants can be the sacrificial lambs. But that's I'm just worried. Like, it's like, yeah. Cover him to a certain point. But when are you actually talking about real issues? I mean, and we have to be the ones to actually talk about issues, people, how they're surviving or not, so I'm tired of like them. They know he's good for ratings. They still know he's 4 years later. They're playing this, they're running the same playbook. And I'm scared.
Yeah, and they don't want to call him all the way out because then they'll lose their access to him. Or not be in the room when he makes these statements, and then they don't make the ad dollars because the advertisers are like, well, this other network already has the exclusive footage. You weren't in the room because you said he was dumb to his face, and now he banned you from all press. Right. So that's capitalism. That is a microcosm of capitalism.
Sure. And what I want to make sure that we do say is that people don't understand that beyond this point, this is not about politics. This is about the survival of the people of the United States, right? Because we were guaranteed something by this Constitution that has not been given to us. right? So when we sit here and have these conversations and people get turned off because they think you hate Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump is the biggest puppet of the game, right? Because Mitch McConnell and Barr are far more dangerous than Donald Trump, because they actually, I mean, how is Mitch McConnell still in office? You understand? And this is why I am exactly so money, right? So when I get motivated because like, and I've been making a campaign everywhere I go. I was on the Breakfast Club this morning and I was like, look, I call to every blood and every crib to use your arms to walk Black people to the voting polls, right?
Yes.
No reason why.
That. Oh my God.
That's what you should be using that for, right? That's where it all started. And they took it away from us so that they can weaponize us against each other, because that's where it started. The Black Panthers were feeding children. And all of the information has always been handed wrong, because you're radical when you demand what it should be rightfully yours. So this is not about Donald Trump and that administration, because truth be told, with people of color, when people are like, we trying to go back to the way things used to be, when exactly, what was good for us ever in the history of America? Where do you want to go back to? The First Nations people don't agree with you. Asian people don't agree with you. Black people for sure don't agree with you. And immigrants, the new immigrants, don't believe it with you. So I'm not trying to go backwards. So when people ask me, why are you a progressive? It's because I'm trying to move forward. I'm trying to take it forward. And I think it's just important for us to have these conversations also about solutions. So can socialism be a part of rebuilding our economy?
It's got to be.
Absolutely.
Or we are over. I mean, look, if people aren't going to get the sustenance that they need in order to survive this pandemic, it's going to be a wrap. I mean, I believe that Mad Max can be a reality. I believe that the end of days can be a reality if we don't get this together. People, like I'm not so certain that they're going to be white people who are going to be cool with living outdoors in large amounts, because they got the postponement of their rent or their mortgage, and now a balloon payment's due 3 months from now, and they got to pay it all to get out. I don't think they're going to take this one, so they're going to have to make some moves towards socialism if they want to survive this.
I'm so glad that you said Mad Max. I got my seed. I ordered my seed.
What?
There you go.
If you've never seen the movie, you don't know what I'm talking about, but I got a whole bag of seeds. So yes, you got to start planting so you can have sustenance, because we don't know what the hell is going to happen with our agricultural infrastructure. And I do believe that socialism can be a part of the answer to help remedy the problems that we have in America. I think we have to stop being for self and just have a basic human understanding and empathy for our neighbors, and want us all to have the same thing. And instead of fighting to go back to work, you should be saying, why is the government not properly subsidizing my family so I don't have to go back to work?
Why aren't they giving me the equipment so I can go back to work and not come back home and kill grandma?
Exactly.
Right,
All of the above. It's like, we had this argument a couple of months ago about people getting $15 an hour. And now there's those same people who are working those jobs who you're calling them essential workers. So you got to think about like the mental gymnastics we do to remedy all of the nonsense that we're force fed.
Yeah. I just want to say, the finger game, where you like hold up your finger and you're like, someone looks at it or whatever. That's what socialism is to me. It's like, we're told not to look at the finger and we're all like, what is it? This is a very ridiculous metaphor. The point is that you suppress something long enough, you suppress workers long enough, and we're going to take an interest. Like, oh, hey, what do you say? Denmark's putting everyone on a federal payroll. They're all going to have their jobs back when this is over. Like, we're not stupid. We have the internet. We can Google stuff. You can't keep us ignorant for that long. And I absolutely think that socialism has a role to play. I think that also anti-racist socialist movements that are deeply rooted in communities of color, and specifically taking cues from Black communities, is definitely the future of how we're going to make change.
Also,
taking cues from Black communities, man. Now with our Miss Leadership class, we got to get beyond these people, these token Negroes that get payoffs, get big checks, and then go out and lie. To get to stand in front of the camera and lie, do the Jim Clyburn, get us all go line up behind Joe Biden, the pro-segregationists, and then we all just fall in line because that's the thing to do. Even Diddy, who now all of a sudden wants to get involved. We needed you about 6 months ago, homie. We need to be voting in them damn primaries so we get a better selection at this point. So
Yes.
misleadership is a real thing, and just because they got black skin, I don't know.
Sure,
This skin folk don't make them kinfolk.
There you go.
I agree. And the other thing is, when we talk about that stuff, we start talking about elections. We only want to get involved on the national stage because it brings us attention, because we have such a celebrity worship problem in this country that everything's become romanticized. Politics is Hollywood. But what we need to talk, I don't give a damn about a Republican. I don't give a damn about a Democrat. I give a damn about a public official that gets on the ground and fights for the people. And so when we talk about Ahmaud Arbery and we talk about George Zimmerman, you don't just get around and tell people to vote in November every 4 years. You got to talk about who's your sheriff, who is the superintendent at the schools, and making sure your kids have a good lunch and are not being charged for their lunches. You got to make sure that you have to think about it within your own habitat. And so for me, that's what drives me. I don't care about any of those people. You show me a politician who's not getting a check, and I'll show you somebody who only gets one side eye, right? That's it, right? Because I don't trust it. And so I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
You got to come back because we got to keep having these conversations.